Your phone is face down on the table. You told yourself you wouldn't touch it. 30 seconds later, your hand is already moving toward it. You don't decide to check it. You just find yourself checking it. But the real answer is far stranger than willpower or addiction or bad habits. It reaches back hundreds of thousands of years into a brain that was built for something else entirely and was never asking for notifications at all. Start with what your brain actually wants. Not entertainment. Not information. It wants uncertainty resolved. Your ancestors lived in small foraging bands, scanning the horizon for threats, tracking who was alive with whom, watching for any change in the status of the group. A rustle in the grass might be wind. It might be a predator. You couldn't know until you checked. So your brain evolved a simple rule. When something is uncertain, investigate it. The investigation itself feels good, not the answer. The looking. This is where dopamine comes in, and almost everyone gets dopamine wrong. It is not the chemical of pleasure. It is the chemical of anticipation. In the 1990s, neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz ran a now famous set of experiments on monkeys, pairing a light with a reward of fruit juice. He expected dopamine to spike when the juice arrived. Instead, it spiked earlier, at the light itself, the moment the possibility of reward appeared. Once the monkeys learned the pattern, the biggest dopamine surge came from the cue, not the payoff. Your brain, it turned out, is not built to enjoy rewards. It is built to chase them. Now hold that discovery next to your phone. Every time you unlock it, you are the monkey, and the lock screen is the light. You don't know what's behind it. A message, nothing. A like, nothing. And that not knowing is the exact mechanism your ancestors used to survive the savannah. Now aimed at a glass rectangle that never stops, producing new uncertainty to resolve. There's a name for what makes this so hard to walk away from. And it comes from a much older set of experiments. In the 1950s, psychologist B.F. Skinner placed pigeons in boxes with a lever. Press the lever. Sometimes food appears. He varied how often the food showed up, and something unexpected happened. Pigeons on a fixed schedule, food every 10th press, pecked steadily and stopped once they were full. But pigeons on a variable schedule, food at random and unpredictable intervals, peck constantly, obsessively, even after they'd eaten enough. Skinner called it a variable ratio reinforcement schedule, and it produces the most persistent, hardest to extinguish behavior known in behavioral psychology. Slot machines run on it. So does your phone. Every scroll of a social feed is a lever pull. Sometimes nothing. Sometimes something wonderful. You cannot predict which, and that unpredictability is not an accident of design. It is the design. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. This wasn't discovered by evolutionary psychologists trying to explain ancient behavior. It was engineered deliberately by people who studied Skinner's work on purpose. Researcher Natasha Dow-Schul spent 15 years embedded with slot machine designers in Las Vegas for her book on the subject. And what she found was an entire industry built around one goal: keep the player in what insiders call the machine zone, a state where time, self, and everything except the next pull disappears. She later watched the same principles get exported almost line for line into app design. Pull to refresh. Infinite scroll. The 3 dots that pulse before a reply arrives. These are not incidental interface choices. They are slot machine mechanics wearing a friendlier face dot, so why does it feel bad afterward? Why do you put the phone down 40 minutes later, feeling emptier than when you picked it up? Because dopamine anticipation and satisfaction are not the same system, and your phone is almost perfectly engineered to trigger one while starving the other. You get the chase. You rarely get the resolution. Your ancestors checking the horizon eventually saw the predator, or didn't, and either way the uncertainty ended and their body could stand down. Your phone never lets the uncertainty fully end. There is always one more unread thing, one more possible notification. One more reason to check again in 4 minutes. Psychiatrist Anna Lemke, who studies compulsive behavior at Stanford, describes the brain as running on a kind of internal balance scale between pleasure and pain. Every hit of stimulation tips the scale toward pleasure, but the brain, wanting balance, tips it back the other way afterward, often overshooting into mild discomfort. Do this enough times, in short, frequent bursts, and the baseline itself shifts. You need more checking just to feel neutral. Not because you're weak. Because the scale adjusted to match the frequency of the tilt stock. Now bring the ancient piece back in. Because dopamine is only half the story. The other half is social. For most of human history, you knew everyone in your world. A tribe of maybe 150 people. The number anthropologists still call Dunbar's number after researcher Robin Dunbar, who found it to be roughly the cognitive limit of stable relationships a human brain can track. Your survival depended on knowing exactly where you stood with every one of them. Who was upset with you? Who might share food with you? Whether your status had shifted since yesterday. This wasn't gossip. It was infrastructure. Losing standing in the group could mean losing access to protection, to mates, to food in a hard season. Your phone did not remove that infrastructure. It just multiplied it by 10,000 and never lets it close. Every message is a status update on your standing with someone. Every like is a tiny signal that you still belong. Every unanswered text is an ambiguous social cue. And ambiguous social cues are precisely what the ancient brain cannot leave alone, because in the ancestral environment, ignoring an ambiguous social signal could get you exiled from the only group keeping you alive. This is why silence from one person can feel louder than noise from everyone else. It's why you'll open an app with nothing new, see nothing new, and check again 90 seconds later anyway. You are not failing at self-control. You are running software built for a world of 150 relationships and a handful of daily uncertainties. And it is now processing thousands. Here's the twist that changes how you should think about this. You have been treating the pull toward your phone as a personal flaw, something to feel guilty about at 1 a.m. when you're still scrolling. But guilt was never the ancient signal for this. Vigilance was. Your brain isn't broken. It's doing exactly what kept your ancestors alive, aimed at a target that was specifically built by people who understood the mechanism precisely, to never let the vigilance switch off, knowing this doesn't make the pull disappear, but it changes what you're fighting. You're not fighting laziness. You're fighting a reward schedule tuned by the same principles that once turned people into fixtures at a slot machine. Running through a threat detection system that evolved for 150 faces around the fire. Not 4 billion faces on a feed. Think about how strange this would look to someone from even 100 years ago. A device that hums quietly in your pocket, that you carry everywhere, that you glance at without being asked to dozens of times a day. For reasons you couldn't fully explain if someone stopped you and asked. They would assume it was giving you something essential, food, warmth, news of danger. It is giving you almost none of that. It is giving you the feeling of almost getting something over and over, which turns out to be a more powerful pull than actually getting it. There's a reason. 2. That checking your phone rarely satisfies the itch it claims to answer. Uncertainty, once resolved, is supposed to end. Your ancestors scanning the tall grass either saw the line or didn't. And either way, the body could stand down afterward, heart rate falling, muscles relaxing. But a notification feed is built to never let that resolution complete. Behind every answered question sits 3 more unopened ones. Behind every read message sits the possibility that someone, somewhere, has sent something new in the 4 seconds since you last checked. Researchers studying digital behavior sometimes call this a state of continuous partial attention. A term coined by former Microsoft and Apple researcher Linda Stone to describe the sensation of never fully arriving anywhere, Because part of you is always scanning for the next thing that might need scanning. It is vigilance with no off switch, because the environment producing the uncertainty is infinite, even though the brain evaluating it evolved in a world where uncertainty eventually resolved. This also explains something that puzzles a lot of people about themselves. Why the checking often feels compulsive, even when the content itself is boring. You already know your feed. You saw it 4 minutes ago. Nothing meaningful has likely changed. Asterisk, asterisk, none of this means you are powerless in front of it. And it doesn't mean the instinct itself is something to be ashamed of. The same wiring that makes you check your phone 40 times a day once kept a small group of primates alive on an open savanna full of things that wanted to eat them. It is not a flaw in the system. It is the system working exactly as designed, just aimed at a target its designers never anticipated, and exploited quite deliberately. So tonight, when your phone buzzes on the table and your hand starts moving before your mind is caught up, notice what's actually happening. That isn't weakness reaching for the phone. That's 100,000 years of survival instinct, mistaking a notification for a rustle in the grass.